Have you ever wondered how two huge companies agree to work together on some new tech, or how entire countries lay the groundwork for a trade deal before a single contract is even drafted? Well, the answer is this really powerful tool we're going to break down today, the Memorandum of Understanding, or what you'll often hear called an MOU.
So here's the big question, right? How do you make a promise official without getting tangled up in all the legal weight of a formal contract? How do you take that initial excitement and goodwill and turn it into an actual plan? The answer, it turns out, lies in the MOU.
The best way to think about an MOU is as a formalized handshake. Seriously, it takes that early spark of trust, that shared vision, and it puts it down on paper. It's basically a written note that says, yep, we're on the same page and we really do plan on moving forward together. This document is the crucial bridge that gets you from a great idea to a binding deal.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. It's pretty simple. First, we'll define what an MOU actually is. Then, we're going to walk through its life cycle in 3 phases: laying the foundation, drawing the map, and then the final steps. And to wrap it all up, we'll see why this document is so much more than just a handshake.
All right, first up, what exactly is an MOU? Well, it lives in this really interesting space, somewhere between a casual chat over coffee and a full-blown legally binding contract. Think of it as a tool you use before the contract to get everyone's expectations aligned and start building the blueprint for a future relationship.
And here's where it gets a little tricky, but also really cool. An MOU is explicitly not a contract, but it's definitely more than just a casual promise. See, if one side starts acting on the MOU and then something goes wrong, a court might actually see parts of it as binding. This gives it this unique mix of being flexible, but also having some real potential legal weight.
The whole process follows this really clear path. It all starts with just informal interest. Two parties realizing they have some shared goals. That then grows into a structured understanding, which is the MOU itself. And that MOU, in turn, creates a clear, logical pathway toward a formal contract. Let's break down each phase of that journey.
So that brings us to phase 1, laying the foundations. This is where a kind of vague idea gets transformed into a clear, shared intent. You can think of it like the early days of a relationship, where both sides are just trying to figure out if they're a good fit. For this first phase to work, you really need 4 key ingredients. First, a preliminary agreement where you both recognize your shared interests. Second, a real spirit of collaboration. Third, you've got to align your expectations early to avoid problems down the road. And finally, a mutual commitment to negotiate in good faith. Basically, a promise to be honest and open with each other.
Okay, next up is phase 2, drawing the map. So you've established that initial trust, and now it's time to actually define the relationship and give this partnership some real structure.
In this phase, you're pretty much the architect of the collaboration. You're defining the scope of the project so nobody goes too far, you're outlining who's responsible for what, you're creating a framework for how you'll actually work together, and you're summarizing the key points for everyone involved. It's all about creating a solid blueprint for success.
Now, the practical power of this phase is huge. It creates a solid guide for everything that comes next. So by the time you actually sit down to negotiate a formal contract, a lot of the hard work of getting aligned is already done. And that reduces so much confusion and potential conflict, making the whole process way smoother.
Now we're at phase 3, the final steps. This is the pre-commitment stage. You're basically paving the way for a formal, binding agreement. The finish line is in sight, and you're just making those last few adjustments to get everything aligned. So in this phase, you start to lock in some preliminary terms. These are the conditions that might actually become part of the final contract. Then both sides double-check and validate their intent, making sure they're still on the same page. And finally, you get to the execution. Signing the MOU isn't just a ceremony. It triggers a real commitment to actually pursue the goals you've laid out.
When you get right down to it, this whole 3-phase process funnels into one main goal. It's yield. The final output is a structured, strategic path that leads you directly to a binding agreement. The MOU isn't just a piece of paper. It's the actual roadmap to a formal, lasting partnership.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. It's time to really understand why an MOU is so much more than a simple handshake. It's an incredibly powerful tool that acts as this crucial bridge between high-level strategy and the nitty-gritty world of law.
I love how our source material puts this. It says MOUs are the interpretive bridge between strategy and law. And that's exactly right. They let people move forward on big strategic goals without getting bogged down in legal details too early. It provides just enough structure to lower the risk while keeping the flexibility you need to innovate.
And I want to leave you with this really powerful idea. An MOU is a legal architecture of becoming. It's not a static thing. It represents a process, a relationship that's growing and changing. It's not a contract yet, but it is fundamentally more than just a conversation. It's the framework upon which great partnerships are truly built.
Which all leads to this one final big question to think about. In any kind of collaboration, is the journey of getting aligned, that whole process of building trust and a shared goal, is that actually more important than the final contract you sign? It's definitely something worth considering. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.